we go. The long journey to find Donkey Kong. Yeah, this is it. Really is it. All the levels. Kremlin. This is it. Yeah, Gloomy Gulch. This is it. This was really great. Then we got K Rules to Keep. We're like at the final in the game, and then the Flying Crook final area. This was it. Oh my god. Okay, we got more Street Fighter Alpha again. This is it. Now, if you weren't really into it, you really just played as like Ryu or Ken. Like, unless you were really a diehard Street Fighter player, you didn't really, you know, play as anyone else. Like, oh, I'm gonna play as Ryu, Ken. That's the wise choice to do. That's where it is, right there. Yeah, Kuma. I'm not sure. I think that's. I don't think that's official that Dan is Akuma's son. I mean, I'm not sure if that was actually official, but I think it is. That was mentioned in Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter. I mean, that was kind of funny, but at the same time, it's kind of serious. We got Old Sagat. Tiger uppercut. Ah, there we go. Sodom, Bison. Yeah, I'm Rose. If you're a girl and you play Street Fighter and you beat a guy with a girl character, that usually said something. I've only seen that once or twice, but you know. Then we got the sports games again. Who plays sports games anyway? Nah, that doesn't matter. Alright. Issue is over. I'm gonna go and look and see what else we can do. Alright, I'll put the video back on in a minute. Alright, I'm obviously going to have to see what's important and what's not, because I can't talk about every single issue I have here. And from there, I'll pick what's important and what's not. Okay, we're at April of 1997, and with this issue, this was one of the reasons why I wanted to show it. It's Soul Blade. Also, it has the first look at Legend of Zelda, and it also has Street Fighter Alpha 3. So we're going to open it up. We're going to go through it. Yes, advertisements were like that in the 90s. Okay. Now I'm going to have to move on. I'm going to go look in the contents. Okay, we're going to have to go to page 102. 102. Yes, sir. 102. Now, here we go. This is what I want to see. This was the first look at The Legend of Zelda. This would be a game that would shake the world and redefine what we call an RPG. And look at this. Some of this, the scenes didn't look like this when it was done. Look at this. Developed and published by Nintendo. Available late 1997, early 1998. At this point, it's not even halfway completed. So let me just continue on. Let me see what else is here. Where is it? I'm trying to find that Soul. Okay, here we go. Soul Blade. Now, back before there was Soul Calibur, there was this. I remember hearing about this, but I never actually played it. We got Taki. Everyone's here. This is before the Soul Blade, you know, started to redo itself. I mean, we got Soul Calibur, which is perfectly fine, and then they decided, let's just redo it again and again and again. Yeah, Nightmare still has the Soul Edge, and he's going to take over the world with it. It's going to do everything like that. And we got Street Fighter. Yeah. This was like before Street Fighter 4. You had to wait like 10 years for that. And that's it. Okay, we're at May of 1997. And this one was one I definitely have to discuss because look over here. Final Fantasy VII, World's Best RPG. So I just opened the book to the excerpt on Final Fantasy VII. And when this game came out, it literally shook the world. Everyone talked about this game. And if you did not play it, you were told that you had to play it. Right here, look at this. Final Fantasy VII, made in the USA. I remember that this game was translated nearly to the Japanese version. I mean, every single word was correct. The Japanese had this story. It was translated perfectly into the American or the English version. It was it. This was it. I mean, this was a game that people bought the console to play. You did not have a PlayStation, you wanted to play Final Fantasy VII, you bought the console just to play that game. That's how good it was. That's how important it was. Everyone played it. It was infamous, including the one scene where Sephiroth came out of nowhere and stabbed Aerith in the back. That when he was in the Forgotten City at the end of the second disc, or the first disc, second disc, that was infamous. I mean, you cried when she died, you cried. I don't care if you're a man, you know, I had a tear in my eye when I saw that. You had you heard Ares' theme in the background with the sad music and the flashback of Ares and her mother and like, you know, and Hojo and everything like that. But this was the first game that really made people say, wow, the story is so important, so legendary. But at the same time, you know, some people would say that, you know, this kind of, you know, gaming, you know, skill would never be done again. And if you ask some people about Final Fantasy, it never really reached that level again. This was also the first Final Fantasy on the PlayStation. You know, it would make like whole other Final Fantasies, and it can be argued that the PlayStation built the Final Fantasy reputation, meaning if it was a Final Fantasy game, it was worth the money to get. If it was a Final Fantasy game, you knew that you would have a good time. You knew that you were going to be spending a lot of time playing this game and that you weren't going to do anything else until you mastered everything. Oh my god. Look at that. Fantasies come true. Look at that. Final Fantasy VII doesn't just live up to the expectations. It surpasses them. That was it. Definitely one of the greatest games of all time. Well, that's it for that magazine. I'm going to see what we're going to do after that. Alright, I decided to figure out what's important and what's not. So we're going to skip a few issues and we're going to go straight to this issue. Mostly because I actually played this. I have this game. It's Tekken 3. Yeah, I may have said a few things about it before. I mean, it's one of those super die-hard games that only really... You can play that game and then you can master it. Well, technically, I heard that the best game was technically Tekken 2, and I sort of believe it. Storyline-wise, you know, with John and Kazuya and Heihachi and all of that. But, you know, it just goes to show that it can't stay like that forever. In a way, I still like this game because the music was really incredible. Yeah, this was the first game to have Jin, if I remember correctly. I haven't played Tekken in a while, but, you know, that's how it goes. Another game that I still play every once in a while was Street Fighter, the new generation. Yeah, I still play that every so often. Yeah, it's like with all the games that are out today, in a way you stick with the old classics because, oh, I don't know, maybe you get along with it better. I mean, you know it's worth your time to play. It's not like some of the games now that you're not sure if it's good or not. Like, what am I doing? Am I wasting my time by even playing this game? No, it's like the old games, they still got it. Now, this is one of the games that I always wanted to play, but I never actually got around to buy. For the Super Nintendo, Harvest Moon. Basically, you're just someone that recently acquired a new farm, and you go along basically trying to make it into a success. You have to buy chickens, buy seeds for crops, sell your products to market, and eventually find a wife. I actually didn't hear good things about this game, but this was one of those things that I wanted to do on my own. I mean, you hear from people about good and bad games, but actually, this game was pretty successful because I remember hearing a few sequels about it, like maybe for the Nintendo 64 or Harvest Moon 2 or something like that. Now, in our lives, there are actually some games that we never get around to play. And when we look back on that, we find out that we made a huge mistake and that we should have played that game or got that game when we got the chance. In this situation, it applies to me in the fact that I never got Final Fantasy Tactics, and I always beat myself up over it because it was a game that I should have got, and that I heard like from my friends who've gotten it, they said it was well worth the money, and that if you're a Final Fantasy fan, you should definitely play it due to the fact that it was so good. I mean, I could have gotten it, but I didn't. But I've heard really good things about this game and the fact that, well, it's like I said, it was one of the core games that you need to play. If you consider yourself a Final Fantasy fan, this was one of the games that you need to have played. I can imagine that such a game now would be a lot of money if you would actually go out and try to buy it. If there's any game, Final Fantasy game, in my opinion, that should have been remade, it should have been this. I mean, look at it at this point. It's only 50% complete. Look at that. Developed and published by Squaresoft. 50% complete. Man, this really takes you back on the fact that, you know, games that we consider established now were just coming out back then. This is really a whole time capsule and all, in the fact that games that are done now were only just being previewed back then. Really something to think about. Now here's another game that I always wanted to play, but I never got around to doing so. Not really a game, but a whole franchise. I've never played any of the Breath of Fire games, but I've always wanted to. We always hear about these different gaming franchises other than Final Fantasy, and that, you know, is it worth it? Is it good? A lot of times not really, but I call this worth it. But the sad thing is, I've not really heard anything about this franchise in a long time. I really think it's wasted talent, a wasted opportunity, really. Now, if there's any fighting game franchise in the late 90s that's actually worth talking about, no, it must be talked about. It's Marvel vs. Capcom. I would say this would be the last really good arcade fighting game to come out in the 90s, because, well, in the whole mid to late 90s, we had the whole Versus franchise, X-Men vs. Street Fighter, Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter. Now we have Marvel vs. Capcom. I think that the whole franchise was really good in the fact that before Marvel vs. Capcom 2, this was the game that you had the most characters playing. Instead of 2 characters that you could select, you could select 3, 2 characters to fight and 1 character that could do a support move. And it was really good in a way. I mean, I remember when I was like in like my late junior high school playing this in the arcade, and you know, I would ask people like, what character would you pick? Like, you know, Captain Commando, Chun-Li, like everyone like that. And like, actually I think Chun-Li was a really good character in the fact that I knew people who actually played as her. And she had like all those moves. It's good to have like projectiles and kicks, like really fast moves. Kind of a good beginner kind of character. And then we had Ryu. It's not like Marvel vs. Street Fighter where you had like Dark Ryu, and the fact that you could actually go back and forth. There's no canon in Marvel vs. Capcom, by the way. You could have Ryu that he could turn into an Akuma transformation, the evil Ryu, or he could do his Ken transformation and do all kinds of moves in that sense. I thought that was really good, and I'm kind of sad that they didn't really continue that. So we move on to Strider, sorry. I didn't really think that Strider was really good. He had good moves, but nothing really strong. Then we had Venom, who was also another character that had faults, and that if you really wanted to use that character, you had to be really good with him. Now here's a character that I actually used, Captain America. I think that Captain America was a really good character to use. Another one was Spider-Man. I played as Spider-Man sometimes, but I never really got into it. Never really thought the character was good. Then we have Morgan, a character that I use every so often. It's like more of a support kind of thing. Then we have the Hulk. Now the Hulk I used a lot because I thought that the Hulk's attacks were really good, and that he actually gave him like a third move, like the Gamma Brain, something like that. It's been a long time, I kind of forgot. Now we have Wolverine. In Marvel vs. Capcom 2, they had the Bone Wolverine and the Adamantium Wolverine. It's like, why have those kind of characters in the first place? Just have regular Wolverine. Then we have Mega Man, which I thought was kind of weak. Then we have Zangief. I always thought that he was a good character. Like the Iron Zangief. The bad thing is that he could never block and he could get killed real quick. Then we got Jim. Here we go. Here's Jim, finally. Like the bloodier Vulcan, the bloodier cannon. Yeah, that was really good. I like those moves. Really good to use. Gambit was a character that beginners used a lot because his special moves, the Royal Flush and the Royal Flash, that was really one that could do a lot of damage. 1, 2, 3, like 70 hits when he threw the cards at the character. Like, there you go, 78 hits. You're dead, you know? It really makes you think. I mean, everyone always had their own character combination, and that's another thing. We had secret characters in this game too, like Lilith, who was like sort of a little bit more powerful version of Morgan. Then we had Roll, who I thought was a little bit more powerful than Mega Man. Then we got Shadow Lady. Just like in Marvel vs. Street Fighter, you had Charlie, who was a secret character. You have Shadow Lady, which is basically a more powerful version of Chun-Li. You know, it's like they do that. Like, they don't really add a real secret character. They just put a regular character in, and they soup them up, and they just put the character black. The character design, that's it. We're not going to make a new character. Let's just make them black. But we're coming to the end of the video, and there's still a lot more to discuss. We haven't got to the end of it yet, I can tell you that. Definitely one of the video games I wanted to talk about was Metal Gear Solid. So we're just going to go look through these pages until we get to the actual Metal Gear Solid section. I believe there's a few other things that I would like to talk about here too, but I'm just going to pass through the pages and show you the ads that are here while we get to what's important and what needs to be discussed. It's like I said before, all these ads, I really do think that they were good, and that if you see ads in magazines now, they're not as good as they were before. You know, due to the fact that they've already been done, they don't have the finesse that they had back then. It's really sad. I really think that's sad. Alright, let's see. Okay, we're still with ads right here in drawings. Nothing really important. Okay, I do believe we're going to come up to one. Oh yes, here we are. Now I'm going to talk about this for a little bit. Now, around 1998, 1999, we were hearing something called the Dreamcast. Basically, Sega's answer to its next system, due to the fact that the Sega Saturn was basically on its last legs by this point. And that there was a lot of buzz with the fact that the Dreamcast was basically the first new next generation console, and that the gaming power behind the Dreamcast was technically superior to that of the Sony PlayStation. But what wasn't known at the time was that the Sony PlayStation was more versatile, and a lot of people were actually still fans of Sony, and to an extent they were not exactly willing to go to Sega again. And gaming goes to Washington in the fact that as then and now, it's the whole ESRB rating system here in America. Basically, are games too violent for kids? Is there inappropriate contact in the game's meaning? Is there inappropriate language, sexual situations, and all that? Basically, the higher-ups in the government are afraid that the video games is turning the youth of America into depraved delinquents. You know, basically destroying the youth of America in a way. I remember the whole deal about this, in the fact that, you know, people making a big deal about nothing. If there's going to be violence in a game, there's going to be violence in a game, no matter what. I remember that the whole rating system, it didn't bother me with my parents. If I asked my parents for a video game, they would buy it for me, even if it was violent. Let's say that there was a rating that it was for mature audiences. And at the time I was underage. My parents, they would get it for me anyway, and they wouldn't think anything of it, because they knew that I knew that it was just a game and it was nothing to really obsess over or to take too seriously. But in today's world, in today's America, anything that's a little too much, parents or conservative groups or whoever would say, hey, this is too much, we need to do something about it, lower the tone of the content in it, and basically just don't do it. Just keep it nice. There's always going to be someone complaining about it. It's real sad, but let's move on. I'm going to start flipping through the pages. Still a lot of ads, but nothing really worth discussing. I really do like these ads. They're really worth it. You don't see ads like this anymore. Oh, here we go. Here we go. If there's any game that I need to talk about, that I need to narrate in this episode, it's definitely this. Metal Gear Solid. This was one of the last games that I actually reserved due to the fact that all of the hype behind it, and the hype was well worth it. This game was one of the absolute best games for the PlayStation due to the fact that everything about it was groundbreaking. The story, the visuals, the graphics, the gameplay, the theme, everything about this game was groundbreaking, and it was done for the first time. The idea was not to go around shooting and killing all the enemies in sight, but the idea of the game was to go around and avoid firefights or enemy contact if it was possible. That was the first, because before that, you just, let's say that it was a sort of espionage game. You just go in and kill everyone and that's it. But the idea was that it's to go around and to not be seen. This was definitely a game to remember. I mean, the characters, it was incredible. We had like Gray Fox, we had Merrill, Otacon, you know, the Colonel Campbell, you know, Master Miller. It was good. I mean, the character designs was just plain incredible. Like, you know, the ninja, I love that part. Remember when the ninja first made his appearance? That was incredible. Everything about this game was the first, you know, it was done. And all the others that came after, like Splinter Cell, you know, all those Tom Clancy games, they basically copied the concept that this game was the first to do. I mean, we have like Metal Gear Solid 2, it spurned the franchise, Metal Gear Solid 3, 4, and so on. But the fact is that Metal Gear Solid was actually a franchise before that, and there were some Metal Gear games before this Metal Gear Solid, but seeing as most of us jumped on the Metal Gear bandwagon, the franchise with this game, technically for everyone, this was the game that started it for everyone. I mean, this was the first that I played, and chances are for you watching, this was the first game that you played as well. Now, another thing is that I remember in the instruction booklet in the game, I believe, it said that Foxhound was established in the late 1990s, and in later Metal Gear games, the storyline, the timeline rather, was adjusted to the fact that, you know, in Metal Gear Solid 3, Foxhound was like established in the 1960s, 70s, or the 80s, or something like that, decades before. But the whole concept of the game was incredible. I mean, here you are playing as Solid Snake, a guy who was basically his job was to sneak around. he basically was a retired mercenary, and he had to come back and do a job for the government. He was the best soldier. He's like Wolverine. He's the best there is. And he really was. I mean, Hideo Kojima, the man who made this franchise, that is the man, you know? Because it really was a good game. And even now, after all this time, more than 10 years later, that game still has an edge. And if you were to play it now, you would definitely think it was good. But we're not done yet, and I hope you stay for the next part. We're almost done with the Video Game Magazine special episode, and we're not done yet. There's still a few more magazines to discuss, and I do believe that I saved a little bit extra for last, even though the best has already been done in some ways.